Good afternoon, friends. I'm Dr. Aajay Shah, and today I have a great guest. Matter of fact, he's my role model. He's my hero. But let me give you a quick update on our page. We have almost now 80,000 followers. Lots of followers from all different countries. We are on Instagram. We are also on YouTube. My wife now has started this healthy cooking live on our Facebook page, so please tune in for that. Uh, we also are growing in other aspects of living healthy, including other pillars of healthy lifestyle. We just had a live 4 hours ago with an OBGYN, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. But today's live right now with Dr. Joel Kahn is a special live. Like I said, he's been my role model. He's an interventional preventative cardiologist. He's been actually a vegan since age 18, which we'll hear more about. He's an international speaker. And the thing I like about Dr. Kahn is that he literally is an encyclopedia of all the medical studies ever done. He remembers all of them in details. He's a great leader and he's a great friend. And I listened to him many times live, and it's a great treat to listen to him. So let's welcome Dr. Kahn.
I hear 80,000 people all over the world clapping for you, Dr. Shah.
Oh,
it's actually my honor because your energy, we were just talking, we're roughly the same age, but it's hard to maintain energy, you know, neither of us are 30, and
Yes.
You're creating content and you're changing lives and your wife's changing lives. I mean, God bless you. And I hope you make 150 because there's a lot of lives that need changing. So
thank you.
I know it's fantastic. You know, as we all know, you know, I love seeing one patient at a time, and we are both cardiologists. But when you can reach 100 or 1,000 or 15,000, you know, one, as long as you're authentic and honest in your messages, and then you and I in the medical world are science-based, then how more wonderful it is, actually.
Oh, thank you. So let's start with, tell us, where did you grow up and who influenced you in your childhood?
Yeah, I have a very exotic background, just like you. My medical office is in Bingham Farms, Michigan, and I grew up 1.5 miles away. Not so exotic, but I did wander to Dallas and Kansas City for medical training. But role models were not actually immediate family. There were no doctors in my immediate family. I had a little heart murmur when I was born. I started seeing a pediatric cardiologist as an infant. But as I became a little bit more aware, I realized this was actually a very nice person. And I just found it interesting. So if you would have asked me at age 10, I would have said, I want to be a heart doctor, even though there was no role model. My family is still in retail business. But along the way, you know, I was very lucky to train with giants. Dr. Jim Willerson, who was in Dallas, one of the leading scientists in the world of cardiology, now in Houston at the medical center, and Dr. Jeffrey Hartzler, who is probably the world's most famous expert in angioplasty and a great mentor, Dr. Bert Pitt, University of Michigan, and now, you know, the whole range of plant-based doctors, and certainly a shout out to Dr. Dean Ornish, who on both a personal level as a friend, but certainly as a mentor in his science, you know, has been fundamental. And I think I'll include you on the list.
No, I think one thing I'll tell you, not only you're very humble and you include everybody in your talk all the time. I remember one of your earlier talk, and you clearly give all the credit to Dr. Dean Ornish, like multiple times. So I think that's really a nice compliment to all the giants we have. But now you have become the giant. I will always be the soldier. I'll learn from you, and I'll spread your message. So
thank you.
Tell us about your own vegan journey, because I've listened to it many times, but all of the listeners and followers, it's very interesting how you started it, how your future wife started it, and how did it continue for this many years?
Well, you know, I always honor the stories where there was a health crisis, whether it was a cancer, a heart event, obesity, diabetes. But that's, I think, fortunately not my story. And as you know, I grew up in suburban Detroit in a Jewish household where we kept kosher. And that means we were aware of what we put in our mouth. There were rules. It wasn't like most people, whatever there is, and you know better than I. go to a medical meeting, go to a medical conference, walk in the doctor's dining room. There's no thought process. I'll eat whatever's there. I'll eat whatever the drug rep brings. When you grow up keeping kosher, and there's many other religious dietary, restrictions, halal, and Jain, and many others, you think for a moment before you eat. So when I went to University of Michigan in 1977, and I wanted to try and honor this tradition of my grandparents and my parents, there was a salad bar, and there was very unattractive meat entrees. It was a university. How many? I know for a fact they had about $1 a day to feed us. I did have a girlfriend from high school I was entering University of Michigan Medical School at age 18. I was on a little accelerated track. She was entering University of Michigan Nursing School. She had the same background. She now, as you kindly pointed out, been my wife of 39 years. And we both made the same decision pretty much week one. It's salad bar. There wasn't anything profoundly medical. There wasn't anything profoundly environmental. But within a few years, I was reading as I was doing my medical studies, and I came across Nathan Pritikin, who is a giant of memory now. He passed along about 30 years ago. Excuse me. And then I came across a book called A Diet for New America, written by a non-doctor, John Robbins, but it kind of laid out the potential for plant diets, for health, for the environment, for animals, for activism. And then a little bit older than you now, by a bit, but I started in Ann Arbor at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital and at the university, 1990. I was an interventional cardiologist. I mean, I was like a gorilla. I could do anything. I could, put a balloon anywhere. 3 a.m. was my best time in life. You're having a heart attack. Goody, goody. I can help you. I mean, genuinely good things. But 3 weeks after I started my job, Dr. Dean Ornish published one of the best scientific studies called the Lifestyle Heart Trial that demonstrated heart disease could actually be reversed with lifestyle centering on a whole food, plant-based, or some people might use the word vegan diet. And anyways, everything came together like it had been a master plan, not a plan I was so bright to determine. I would encourage any cardiology fellow, any internal medicine resident, go plant-based, read the literature. You'll have an amazingly powerful tool in addition to everything else you learned during your training. Mine was serendipity. Mine was faith-based in its onset, which is nothing we should apologize for. Sometimes you need to seemingly hide behind your religion and your faith and your upbringing, but it just turned out to be great. So since 1990, my patients heard at least for 2 minutes and sometimes for half an hour during every visit. There's a book by Dr. Ornish called Reversing Heart Disease. That was even in 1990. Then we got Forks Over Knives or the China Study or Dr. Esselstyn's book. I sometimes, I try and tailor Dr. Bernard's book. I've written 6 books. Most of my patients actually walk out of my office if they're new with somebody else's book. It might be Brooke Goldner, MD, on autoimmune disease, or Dr. Bernard on diabetes or endocrine, or Dr. Esselstyn. Or they want to take one of my books, that's fine too. But I want them to read. But it's really, it is a tool that doctors don't engage in. As I look around your background, you obviously know it. Lifestyle, nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress management, sometimes vitamin deficiencies being corrected, all these root causes, sleep disorders, smoking, of course, trauma as a child. I mean, we're human beings, we're trying to make good decisions in tough times. And sometimes even mom and dad saying, clean your plate and yelling at us, and you're an obese 45-year-old because what happened when you were 12. So, I love the kind of holistic, functional approach to medicine because it recognizes that people are human beings. We all have our frailties. We all have our strengths. So always trying to learn and always trying to, give people permission to make changes, experiment, make mistakes, but move forward. But yeah, the plant-based journey was for sure, both for my personal health and my wife's personal health, the best decision. you may know, and if you get your cholesterol under control at 20, it's more powerful than getting it under control at 60. It's still good. Blood pressure, blood sugar, fitness. But if you can adopt a healthy diet as a teen, as a young adult, you have multiplied by manyfold your ability to lead a healthy life. There's nothing great about surgery. There's nothing great about prescription drugs. There's nothing great about having 7 specialists. It's just so common, and as you see in your patients. So my greatest day is when somebody hardly needs to see me or follow up anymore. I mean, I see you in a year because everything's on track. I mean, that's a victory, but that's what you and I are both shooting for.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent journey you had, and I think many times when we go through at a personal level, we can actually relate better to the patient that going on a healthy lifestyle journey, eating plant-based food, maybe slightly difficult, definitely in 1977. Now it's much easier. We have so many plant-based organizations, so many plant-based online food delivery services, every grocery store, whole food, even there are nutrition labels, Dr. Furman's nutrition index on every label and whole food. So I think now not eating whole food plant-based cannot be excused because now we have a lot more options than 77. So if you did it in 77, we all should be doing it. Fortunately, I was always a vegetarian religiously because of religious reasons, like you did, and now I'm vegan. But that brings my next question to you. I think America eats 65% processed food, 25% animal products, 10% plant-based, and most of the plant-based food is processed, including French fries and ketchup and Oreos and other things. So, what do you think? How can we change the mindset of Americans that meat is must with every meal, protein means meat, and how can we quickly convince them that for saving their healthcare dollars, for saving their health, for saving their suffering, nutrition or what we eat is the most important pillar out of all 6 pillars?
Yeah, I agree, and well said. And how can we do that? And we don't have the government leading that program. We still have very detrimental lobbyists in the meat, dairy, and egg industry that constantly allow these USDA subsidies. I've read that like a $7 meal at McDonald's is actually a $15, $16 meal, but the subsidies, our own government permits to allow these companies to buy at a discount and actually the food to be produced at a discount. I mean, I'm not trying to punish families, but if a McDonald's burger were $15, you would probably pick a plant-based meal. If a salad was less expensive than a meat taco, you'd probably pick the salad for some people. So we have really deep-rooted disparities that don't promote it. I'm always constantly offended, frankly, by hospitals. I'm on staff at Harper University Hospital in Detroit, Michigan, a wonderful hospital with a great legacy of early heart surgery and advanced cancer care. The first thing you see when you walk in the lobby is Wendy's today, right now, 2020. So you can get your Baconator burger for $2.49 and go to the salad bar in the rest of the food area of the hospital. It's more expensive. These are offensive. So we can't depend on the hospital system at this point. We can't depend on the government. All we can do is you and I as physicians, nurses, dentists, chiropractors to bring up the concept most people don't have, that food really is a pathway to health. Food is a pathway, as you said, to avoid the cost of medication, surgery, therapies. So you may spend a little bit more. You don't have to. Rice and beans and spices and potatoes and greens can be very inexpensive. Yes, eating in restaurants can be expensive and chefs can be expensive, but eating well. So we have to, educate as medical professionals. We have to use social media to teach. We have to use every avenue. We have to advocate like the USDA every 5 years, and it's that time right now where the advisory committee has come up very strongly in favor of plant-forward diets. But by the time the formal USDA guidelines are formalized, the meat industry, the beef industry, the dairy industry, the egg industry are going to bring out their very well-funded resources and try and whittle it down, because these are important for school meals and guidelines for the military and others. But I'm hopeful. What I do is I pull out my prescription pad in the office, and if it's a new patient, whether they know me or not, you must watch Forks Over Knives on Netflix. You must watch What the Health. You must watch Game Changers movie 2019. I mean, within a couple hours, they have more nutritional education with references from scientific journals all over the movies, documentaries, than a medical student gets and a resident gets. I mean, cardiology fellows are perhaps the worst. There's no nutrition on the board, so there's no nutrition training during cardiology training. And that's no different in 2020 than it was when I was doing cardiology fellowship in the 1980s. I'm optimistic because I do see the young doctors, the young students, they see athletes, they see, rock stars, they see Cory Bookers and politicians. We never saw that. I actually, if I think about it, I can't think of one famous plant-based, superhero, except for a few like Nathan Pritikin and Dean Ornish, but not in this social media movie rock star world that I can ever remember in those 70s and 80s. But now there's so many examples. So I am actually optimistic, but it's odd. It should come from within. Hospitals should be a teaching laboratory. You're in the hospital for your gallbladder, your hip replacement, your stent. You should be fed healthy, whole foods, largely plant-based, with literature about the role of food as medicine. Food can help you heal from your recent illness, surgery, trauma, wound healing, wound infection. We miss that, we fall. So shame, hospital CEOs. You need to up your game. I will say St. Joseph Mercy Hospital in Ann Arbor, which was my first hospital long ago, does a better job than average. There are other systems that do a better job than average, but there's not many. And budget's an issue, but in the end of the day, it still is not an excuse. Doctors' dining rooms with fried mac and cheese and sausage, egg McMuffin breakfast, we can't tolerate it. So, we just got to use it. That's why you have energy, I have energy. I never turn down an interview request because it's an opportunity to touch, reach some more people. And I actually go on paleo interviews, keto interviews, and actually carnivore interviews. I just did one last Friday with 100,000 viewers, me versus another doc who eats meat for breakfast, meat for lunch, meat for dinner. Now, I'm the oddity, and I'm not going to go in there like a jerk. I want them to recognize, there is a wealth of literature, a wealth of clinical experience, and they're experimenting. And I'm not trying to talk them out of their experiment, but subtly, without being a jerk, I want them to recognize you and I have a wealth of science behind us. One last statement. About 2 weeks ago, I wrote a blog. I tend to publish on LinkedIn and I share it everywhere. It's easy. 8 new studies in the last 8 weeks about plant-based health and medicine. These were all from peer-reviewed National Library of Medicine. Well, it turns out since then, and these were phenomenally interesting studies on saturated fat, on brain health, on longevity. There's been 2 new massive studies. One about 715,000 people in a database, plant-forward diets, plant protein, live longer versus meat protein. And the other one was about a nearly plant-based diet and controlling your blood pressure without medication. Do you want to take 3 pills or do you want to try and control your blood pressure without medication? Well, how many salads, how many apples, how many sweet potatoes, how many bean chilies are you making in a week? So I got to rewrite the blog because the pace of our research is wonderfully rich and accelerating. But and you and I want to make decisions based on science. I've said before, I'll say it again. Show me a heart disease reversal study with McDonald's burgers, and I will give my patients the option of Ornish or trash. But I'm pretty sure trash is never going to be documented to do what we're supposed to do, which is, give a man a fish. He's, fed for a day, give him lessons, teach him how to fish. He's ready for life. So you and I teach people how to catch, not fish, but catch health through the 6 pillars.
No, I think that's a great way you described everything. And I think, as I understand, a dollar fries at McDonald's is going to cost you $8 in health in 15, 20 years. So I think you're
Wow.
just paying 8 times more
Right.
afterwards, plus all the suffering and all the early death and all the family losing a loved one and all those things just comes on top of the increased cost. And I think I also start to realize that some of us, like you and me, we have to make this thing a grassroots movement. We have to make this knowledge and this actually like asking for as a household thing, that if we teach every American that they go to the hospital and ask for healthy food in their cafeteria, if they go to the doctor and ask for advice on nutrition and sleep and exercise, I think our society, our medical societies will change, hospitals will change, eventually government will change, and
Right.
eventually industry will change too, because American industry is genuine enough that they can even make money from plant-based food. I think it's just that we have not just demanded that. I think there is money to make in plant. If somebody makes my salad $2 more expensive to make the profit, I'll be happy to do it because it's healthy for me instead of eating a $1 burger. So I think when people say that there is no money to make in plant-based food, that's not true. People will be willing to pay slightly more to be healthy. So industry just needs to give in that message. There has to be like a demand from the public that we want healthy food and we will pay more, but provide us the healthy food. And this, some of this Impossible Burgers and other thing is a foot in the right direction, that
Okay.
it's a transition food. We are at least going from animal based to the plant based, and eventually will be homemade whole food bean burger what my wife makes. So I think I agree with you. But that brings
I just want to say you, because you and I are lucky. One, we're married, and two, we're married to spouses that support what we do in our diet. I'm talking to people right now. I have patients that have embraced healthy, whole food, plant-based diets for their heart disease, their blood pressure, their erectile dysfunction, their diabetes, their weight, their inflammation. And I always ask, who cooks? Well, I have to make my own meals because my spouse, and it can work either way. It could be same sex, it could be the wife, it could be the husband, whatever it is. My wife just isn't on board with it. So I say, shame, 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 you spouses, not to make you feel bad. But, if you've got a family member striving to improve, don't hold them back. Join in, help them, support them. Be the one that will do the grocery shopping or will eat the same meal or will cook some of the time, at least part of the time. I mean, these are people just trying to get and crawl out of a hole of illness and drugs and probably shortened lifespan. So I hope more people will have families doing this as a unit, because that's obviously kids that start eating healthy like you and I and our spouses are the luckiest kids in the world, because they're going to have a great advantage lifelong. It's just, as I said, multiplied when you start at 18 or 15 or 21 or 12 or whatever it is.
actually that brings up the point that Mark Huberman, our good
Yeah.
friend, he was on our live just 2 weeks ago, and he was actually raised since his day one on
Yeah.
this earth as a vegan and plant-based, and he actually ate raw food for almost until age 14 or 15.
Yeah.
So he was actually giving a good point that if you start at a young, very young age, not necessarily birth, but at a very young age, from whole food plant-based, the kids, they learn so much and they can cook so much, and they have pretty much never tested the unhealthy food. They never miss like the unhealthy food. A lot of Americans at age 50, when I asked them to go plant-based, they said that, but I remember that burger eating with my dad 40 years ago, and a burger gives me almost a joy and a memory of my dad. But if we start at a very young age, as a father, as a mother, eating whole food plant-based together, kids will grow out to be like that too one day. So I agree with you. I think it has to start at a very young age. My next question to you is, which is another second pillar in our healthy lifestyle, the role of physical activity. As I understand, we don't need to go to gym 2-3 hours a day. We just need a small amount of physical activity. Please tell us more about that.
Yeah, I've been a director of a cardiac rehab program for 10 years at Beaumont, and I'm not a super athlete. I ran a couple 10Ks long ago. I don't think I'll ever run a 10K again. But I have been lucky to have been on a tennis team and then swimming. And then I have an ADD approach to fitness. It can be anything, it can vary. And a lot of it is, you say, natural movement. When we talk about the blue zones, pockets of longevity in Japan and Greece and Italy and California and Costa Rica, they don't have gyms. And in fact, now none of us have gyms, but they're climbing, they're hiking, they're dancing, they're gardening, they're standing, they're moving. They're just not stuck sedentary. So many of us, unfortunately, have jobs, accountants and lawyers and judges and truck drivers, where we're forced to be sedentary. And some of those don't have easy solutions. But for many of us, we can use a standing desk. I'm at a standing desk right now. I'm always at a standing desk in my office. Yes, I may sit down for half an hour and pop back up. Actually, there's some data now. If after an hour of sitting, your metabolism slows, your blood sugar and insulin resistance may become more adverse, you can just drop down and do 5 to 10 minutes of push-ups. 5, 10 seconds, actually. 5, 10 minutes better. 5, 10 seconds. 5, 10 seconds of jumping jacks. 5, 10 seconds of jogging in place. It actually blunts the adverse change in your metabolism. So natural movement, natural health is great. Yeah, it's wonderful. The American Heart Association, 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise where you're slightly breathless. It's only 22 minutes a day. And now, frankly, a lot of us are finding, with gyms closed, a lot of people have hopefully discovered they've got a sidewalk, they got a bike, they got some weights, maybe they have a treadmill. You can do 22 minutes a day, every day, of slightly breathless activity without completely disrupting your life, and find you feel better, you're more focused, you're gonna sleep better that night if you work out in the morning. I don't like to work out right before bed. It doesn't have to be onerous. There's no excuse. 5 minutes beats 0, 15 minutes beats 5. So I have a crazy variation from yoga to weights to cardio to, I happen to live by water, so kayak, to sometimes, I'll just do jumping jacks and jump ropes. But it doesn't really matter. Yes, fitness is a core pillar for the brain health, crucial for brain health, for lowering your insulin resistance, or your blood sugar is better, your triglycerides are better, your total cholesterol is better, your blood pressure may come down. And if you're really focused, like you and I teach, on natural health, and maybe not adding a medicine every visit, maybe even being able to slightly taper down doses with your medical doctor, you've got to add fitness into the program. Some of my anti-aging colleagues, they exercise for their brain. And even though they don't want to, they exercise for their brain, because we absolutely know it helps. And I'll say finally, I think the pandemic going on in America is actually anxiety over the economy, social change, the virus, of course, dollars coming into the household. One of the core principles of managing anxiety, if you can exercise in nature, if you can walk in the grass, walk in a forest, walk where there's fresh air. The Japanese call it forest bathing, because, man, if you're outside in the sun and breathing, clean air, you've actually stacked multiple benefits. Sunshine increases nitric oxide, which you and I know lowers our blood pressure, improves our arteries, improves our sexual health, as well as adding vitamin D through our skin. So yes, I don't love every day crawling out of bed to make sure I get 22 minutes, 25 minutes, 30 minutes. But to me, it's a daily activity. And the other principle I have is don't hurt myself. So I've used trainers at times, and I've been in CrossFit at times. I actually, as I'm over 60 now, you throw your back out, you've just lost your exercise program for a while. So I do fitness that's likely not to endanger my health and my joints. And, I'm not trying to set a world record.
And those are excellent points. Like you said, just 22 minutes, something which your body can do, something which is your age appropriate, something which involves some cardio, some being breathless, some lightweight training, doing it at home, on your sidewalk, doing biking. And I think, like you said, exercise has been proven now, not just in terms of making you live long, but anxiety and sleep and insulin resistance. So 22 minutes, I'm not asking too much. You are not asking too much. Everybody can spare 22 minutes. So that brings to the next important pillar, is the sleep. And we partly touch on it, but please, Ruben, tell us about the importance of sleep and how an American can get more sleep than typical 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, well, You know, it's interesting you bring that up. And when you trained and I trained, I can remember we got like maybe half an hour on sleep at University of Michigan Medical School. We actually learned about something called the Pickwickian syndrome. You're 450 pounds, like a character in Charles Dickens, and you're just suffocating at night from massive obesity. That's all we learned about. And fortunately, there are people, but not too many people like that. Fast forward to 2020, and sleep health is, I have Google alerts. I think I actually get more Google alerts about sleep health than any other topic in the wellness arena, and I have dozens and dozens just to keep an eye on things. So it's huge. And I don't think it's an artificial industry. I mean, there are people that have anatomic reasons, tonsils, large neck, sinus, polyps. And then there are people that have central issues, and then unfortunately obesity. But people that are, you know, interrupted sleep, gasping, restless legs, hypoxemia, low oxygen. So I'm a big fan in my clinic. I use a lot of home sleep studies so that it's very simple and very easy. And I diagnosed a lot of mainly mild sleep apnea because we know interrupted sleep, earlier brain impairment. We know interrupted sleep, high blood pressure, interrupted sleep, higher blood sugar, higher inflammation for sure. A lot of it is because waistline is high and overall body fat is high. It all relates to, you know, go even further, relates to processed food diets, lack of exercise, and some lifestyle choices. But there actually is some data if you want to keep your heart youthful. There's a interesting study, I think it's from the Netherlands, called the Morgan study, Morgen. People that got 7 hours sleep at night versus less than 5, the amount of coronary artery calcium, or the sign of silent heart artery damage, was much higher in people with less than 5 hours sleep than those getting kind of 7 to 7.5. So personally, I wear a little ring called an Aura ring. Other people wear Fitbits and Garmins. I'm not that into that high-tech stuff. It's so simple, but I kind of like to see the efficiency and the REM and the deep sleep. I wear blue light blocking glasses. They're yellow. So when I'm reading for half an hour before bed, the bright light isn't telling my pineal gland in my brain, don't make melatonin. I want my brain to work for sleep. I will take something, magnesium, a little bit of melatonin. I use a lot of natural hemp oils, which have become popular and are not addictive. Other people use herbal and lavender and essential oils and cold blankets. Just find something. It could be meditation. It could be, it's called binaural beats, this kind of relaxing music. But you know, if you're not sleeping well, find somebody. It could be a, you know, a wellness authority, of which there's many. It could be a physician like you and me. But and the last thing is, you can't get 7 hours of sleep if you're in bed for 5 hours. I mean, you know, you talk to your patient, what time you go to bed? 1 a.m. Pretty hard to get 7 hours sleep if you got a job in the morning. If you're watching movies, it's usually movies or online on the computer. I mean, it's usually pretty mindless stuff. And if you don't want to age fast, if you don't want to look old, you better focus pretty heavily on, you know, the restorative, regenerative features that happen at night. It's like, you know, it's taking our car in every night for a tune-up when we get 7.5 hours of pretty efficient sleep. And it takes work. It takes a dozen things to do, you know. Take an Epsom salt bath at night if you have the luxury of doing that. Rub magnesium. I mean, there's other things you can do.
No, I think I agree. I think sleep is probably one of the most ignored pillars of healthy lifestyle. I think that's partly because of American culture, that sleep is actually waste of time. People who sleep don't get success. And I mean, all those things in the movies and books, I think has been mischaracterized, the importance of sleep. And now, fortunately, with this lifestyle medicine college, in putting the sleep as an important pillar. And I agree. I think tracking sleep is important with the Fitbit or the ring, which you wear. I think Dave Asprey recommends that ring to wear. And I think to be honest with you, some kind of tracking device is important. Otherwise, if you don't have any data, how would you know that your sleep is enough deep, enough REM? And I think this staying up late at night watching Netflix and movies and you know, CNN and Fox is just not necessary. I don't think people realize that sleep actually is such an important pillar that unless you get 7 hours, you will never know the importance of it. And I think I always tell my patients that if you want to be healthy in 1 week, it's not going to be your diet, it's not going to be exercise, but it's a 1 week of good sleep will make you so fresh and so productive. Sleep actually gives you more bang for the bucks, so much quicker and faster than any other pillars. Even relationship takes sometimes weeks and months. I think sleep is the fastest way to be productive, to be healthy, to be energetic. So sleep should be taken
I
very
couldn't agree
seriously.
more, because I think it affects our judgment and our willpower. When you're exhausted, you're probably not going to put on your gym shoes and go take a brisk walk, and you may not pack your lunch, or now that we eat at home, but you're tired. That's when our food addictions and others are not as defensible. So yeah, in my practice, I think actually I try and conquer sleep, then nutrition, or both at the same time. But people understand they're of huge intersection and importance. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's
the light bulb was a wonderful creation, but the light bulb created a new kind of ability and electricity, which we all welcome, but it has brought on challenges to our health.
Yeah, let's talk about something of your favorite subject. I always have listened to many of your lectures on YouTube, read many books from you, and you always stress the importance of getting this coronary calcium score done. And you partly mentioned a study from Netherlands. So
Right.
please tell us more about calcium score. Who should get it? What is the importance, and what does it mean in terms of predicting the future heart attack?
Right. So, the oddity that I think anybody listening will quickly realize is you're 45 or 50, you go see your primary care doc for a physical exam. And if you're a woman, you're going to be encouraged to get a mammogram. And you might say, but doctor, I don't have any breast lumps or pain or discharge. Well, we just want to be sure we're going to screen for breast health. And if you're 50, your doctor is going to say, go get a colonoscopy or maybe do a Cologuard. Ah, doctor, I don't have any bleeding. I don't have any problem. No, we shouldn't take a chance of missing a early colorectal cancer. But at the same age range, your doctor has suggested nothing to screen for a disease that kills 10 times more people than breast cancer or colorectal cancer, which is heart disease. You could be 52 years old and drop dead, and at your 50th year physical, maybe you get an electrocardiogram, although that's not actually payable any longer for routine physicals. Get your blood pressure, get some blood work. Maybe you'll get a question about nutrition, which is being recommended more and more, but doesn't happen much. So long story short, there's a big void. There's a big need. There are, you mentioned very proudly and amazingly 80,000 followers. Well, half of them probably have silent atherosclerosis. I don't have any problem. I don't have any angina. I've never had a heart cath, a stent, a bypass. Well, half of you have silent atherosclerosis that puts you at risk. How can you tell? University of California, San Francisco, more than 25 years ago, identified a simple 10-second CAT scan of the heart. Lie down, hold your breath, go home. No needle, no injection, no iodine, no allergic reaction. The amount of radiation equivalent to a mammogram. One time, maybe do it again in 10 years. Used to be $1,200 in Flint. Now it's $75 at Harper Hospital, at St. Joseph Mercy, St. Joseph Oakland. Maybe it's $100 at Beaumont. You pay out of pocket. But anyways, in about 5 to 10 seconds, CAT scan gives you a number. You come back 0, you have no calcium in your heart arteries. Calcium's great in bones, great in teeth. It's not a good thing in your heart arteries. Calcium score is 0 over the next 10 to 12 years. Your future risk of heart attack, stroke, and other illnesses is exceptionally low. And if your calcium score comes back some number above 0, might be 100, 400, 800, 1400, 2200, you are walking around and you're not inevitably going to have a program. There actually is a nice little online calculator. If you know your heart calcium score and some other numbers, it's called AstroCharm. I use with my patients. But you can predict over the next 10 years what's the likelihood. And it's very motivating. Okay, I didn't know I had silent heart disease. And the final point is, if you've had a heart attack, bypass, or if you've had a relative that dropped dead, every one of them could have known they had heart disease 10 years before, when it wasn't so advanced, when it wasn't so lethal or life disrupting or causing disability. And it's just like the mammogram and the colonoscopy. So yeah, I really insist I give my patients a prescription, because you do need a prescription. In Indiana, you don't. In Michigan, you do. And in fact, if you go to Fort Wayne, Indiana, it's about $45 without a prescription. If you go to the University Hospital in Cleveland, it's free. they actually offer this free to the public to get this heart calcium CT scan. And I've written a book about it 5 years ago, and I lecture on it because it's a way to potentially, make a big dent in avoiding heart disease. Because if they're abnormal, they need to see you. They need to see me. They need to see a dietitian. They need to read a book by Dr. Esselstyn or Dr. Ornish or others that have embraced, real reversal and prevention programs based on science.
No, I think I agree with you. I think calcium scoring is, like you said, is very cost effective, only $80. It's a radiation of a mammogram. It doesn't take more than total 10 minutes to be in and out of the office or the radiologist suite, and results are ready in a day or two. It's definitely probably 10 times less expensive than colonoscopy. I think so. I think definitely calcium scoring after, in my opinion, after age 50 for all men, probably after 60, 55, 60 for all females, should be done one time. Know your risk, modify your lifestyle, take statins if necessary, bring your LDL down, and do everything in your power so that score doesn't grow. And maybe do the score every 5 to 10 years to give you the feedback and motivation how aggressive your lifestyle is. Because Dr. Kahn, I realized many times, some patients, including myself, sometimes we realize we are doing great until some data comes back and tell us that you're doing great, but you need to do greater. And that's where I think, like tracking sleep, if we always think our sleep is great unless Fitbit tells me or the ring tells me. Same way if calcium scoring comes back in 5 years that it went from 40 to 310, whatever you did for 5 years wasn't working. So next 5 years, you might as well do better. So I think some of the data are so important. Many patients don't realize that sometimes doctors recommend this periodic testing. There's a reason for it. So let me ask you your next kind of a typical hot topic, and you have written actually a whole book on it, and that's about the lipoprotein A. Tell us about lipoprotein A. Tell us about your book and why everybody should get lipoprotein A done once in their lifetime.
Well, I know we're putting a lot of interesting ideas in front of people. I'm going to hold up my book only so people can see the word lipoprotein little a, because it's a lowercase a. That's a very technical medical term for a kind of cholesterol that you can inherit from mom and dad. And as you said, but doctor, I sleep. But doctor, I do my 22 minutes a day of fitness. But doctor, I eat a whole food plant-based diet. I'm pretty much bulletproof. Well, if you have the calcium score 0, I would say you are pretty close to bulletproof from heart disease. Well, it turns out this cholesterol particle is inherited from mom and dad in 25% of people, 1 out of every 4. That means in the United States, 90 million. In the world, 1.8 billion. In India, oh my God, it's hundreds of millions. It isn't affected by diet, fitness, sleep, smoking or non-smoking. So you may look real good on the outside, but you inherited this from maybe one parent or both parents. It's a simple blood test. You could go to your primary care doctor and say, I have a lot of heart disease in my family. Please check my lipoprotein A, because it won't show up on your cholesterol panel. Cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides, it won't show up. You just have to check a box, $25. It's billable and is payable. If you don't have it, you're never going to get it because it's genetic. And in fact, I think it'd be a wise thing to check it early in life to give relatively young adults some perspective that they need to do more in the heart disease prevention world or less. It's been suggested by the American Heart Association that you ordered if there's a strong history of heart disease at a young age in your family. But all of a sudden that's changing a little bit. In Europe, they're now recommending everybody should get it tested once. It's just a blood test. And I totally agree with that. Earlier in life, the better. In my practice, I've been drawing it for years and years. And very often, people scratch their head. I don't understand why my grandfather had bypass surgery and my father had a stroke and my mother had, a stent. Well, boom, this comes back and it's sky high. The challenge is there's no unanimity of what you do if it's elevated. What everybody would advise is get everything else right. Don't smoke, fitness, diet, blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol. Do what you need to do. There are some natural approaches. Whole food plant-based diets appear to lower it. Niacin appears to lower it, which is an over-the-counter prescription B vitamin. There is a drug in trials right now from Novartis, but we won't know for about 4 years that dramatically lowers lipoprotein little a, and it's being studied in 7,600 heart patients. That's how important a problem it is. So I'm optimistic. I wrote the first book in the world on the topic. I'm not the leading academic doctor, but I needed a book for my patients and a book for the public. It just got published a few months ago. But everybody's going to know about it. Just like 60 years ago, the word cholesterol wasn't known to the public, and now people understand that there's a blood test called cholesterol. And it's going to take the pharmaceutical industry to drive with their dollars the educational process, but we don't have to wait. And in my practice, I'm usually pretty good at getting people's blood levels down if they need to. I mean, if your calcium score is 0 and this is abnormal, yeah, lead a healthy lifestyle and have no anxiety. But if your calcium score in that CT scan is, really high, we can focus on this and do some good. So it's new for most people to hear about, but it's as important as blood sugar, blood pressure, and standard cholesterol.
I think that's an excellent point. I have read your book, and it's an excellent book. I actually highly recommend all of our viewers to get it.
Well,
and like you said, it's a one-time test. It doesn't cost that much. It gives you clear-cut idea whether the family history you have, is it because of this molecule which your parents gave you? And I think, in my opinion, everybody should get it done once in their lifetime. So that brings the next kind of a big topic, which is also I've seen you debated many times, including with Dr. Chatter, many people actually, about on Joe Rogan show, about this role of saturated fat and heart attack and strokes. And a little bit tell us about the role of coconut oil and olive oil.
Yeah, that's a fun topic. And, you would think, we've had science focused on nutrition for decades, that we would have some agreement. And there actually is some agreement. Let me point out, before I go off, if you go to the Harvard School of Public Health and you look up healthy food plate in 2011, they have this gorgeous plate as an example. Half of it is fruit and vegetables, a quarter of it is whole grains, drink water, and then they got a little section called protein. You might like chicken, I might like tofu, but that's unanimity. And the Canadian government, the Australian government, a group called Eat Lancet, there actually is a lot of unanimity about eating healthy. Now, you and I do it without any animal products. I'm happy if my patients are 90% there, and if they choose to eat a piece of salmon or chicken once in a while, I'm not going to guilt them out, but they're on their way to a complete diet. Well, it turns out in the early analysis, early research, why were so many Americans having heart attacks after World War II, which was an observation. A very brilliant scientist in Minneapolis focused on nutrition, and he honed down and he identified saturated fat. That's what's butter, that's what's cheese, that's what's lard, that might even be ghee from your home country. That's what's in marbled meats and turkey, and that's what's almost never in plant foods to any excess, except for coconut oil. And he identified more saturated fat in the diet, like Finland, like United States, higher blood cholesterol, higher heart attacks, higher stroke, and countries with low saturated fat intake, Japan, Croatia, they didn't eat much animal foods. They didn't eat much butter and lard, low cholesterol levels, low heart attack rates. And that led the American Heart Association as early as 1970s to say, start limiting butter, lard, meats, limit sugar too. That was part of their recommendation. And let's drop heart attack rates. It worked extremely well in Finland. And most people would say it has worked very well in the United States for heart disease. It hasn't worked so well for obesity and diabetes because we keep eating all that processed junk food. As recently as a major cardiology study in April 2020 called the ischemia study, where they advised serious heart patients to eat a low saturated fat diet, low butter, low lard, low animal foods. It proved to be very effective. So there is unanimity, but what's the beef industry, the dairy industry, and the egg industry going to do with this recommendation? And they got very organized in 2010 to start influencing some physicians, some dietitians, to promote a different plan. And a couple articles were published in Time Magazine, 2014, Eat Butter, a book in 2014 called Big Fat Surprise, How Eggs, Meat, and Dairy Can Make You Healthier. So there's been a purposeful, it is a conspiracy, it's a money deal, attempt to confuse the public. Maybe we can go back to meat and eggs and bacon and dairy, and the scientists in the 50s, 60s, 70s got it wrong. Humans haven't changed, and they did not get it wrong. The lobbyists have their hands around our neck trying to choke off American, health by promoting these foods. So just the last thing, this is so political, and everybody knows hashtag fake news right now all over the place. About 8 weeks ago, a very esteemed science body called the Cochrane Library out of England, and most people feel their scientific analyses are the most unbiased, high quality, published another review article. They took all this data. Saturated fat causes heart disease. Reducing saturated fat, which means cutting back on butter, eggs, meats, cheese, reduces heart disease. Boom, 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 boom. Well, I saw that in the National Library of Medicine. I said, yes, this is right. I looked around the world. There wasn't one article written about it. Time, Newsweek, New York Times, LA Times. There wasn't one. There seriously got ignored. 2 weeks later, 12 scientists wrote a paper in our journal, Journal American College of Cardiology, that just randomly happened to be published 2 weeks after this high level one. And they wrote a paper that we think saturated fat is no longer an issue. Just another one of these garbage papers. Of the 12 authors, 9 had a list. I take funding from the dairy board. I take funding from the meat board. That article has been repeated dozens, if not hundreds of times, because Time Magazine and Newsweek and USA Today and CNN, they love to tell the public that it's okay to eat the food you love. Plus their advertisers are fast food and dairy and meat institutions. So they've done nothing but to repeat the cycle of confusion, confusion, confusion. Coconut oil happens to be about the only plant-based food that's even higher than beef in saturated fat. And although nobody's really done a great long-term study, the American Heart Association, Dr. Kim Williams, Dr. Neil Barnard, Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn, and other scientific-based, plant-based doctors have all advised that there's no evidence coconut oil is a health food, and there are many good substitutes, even extra virgin olive oil, compared, because extra virgin olive oil is about 15% saturated fat versus 85%. But maybe you don't need any oil at all. Maybe you can learn to steam and use an Instant Pot and saute and vegetable broth. So I do believe, we really do know that the least amount of animal saturated fat in a diet or none is the best approach to maintain your weight, to reverse type 2 diabetes, to avoid and reverse heart disease, and all. And if you absolutely insist in using an oil, use extra virgin olive oil limited. There is quite a bit of data from the Mediterranean diet and other studies, but there's no reason to do what's the first thing we do at a restaurant? There's the bread basket, and there's the poor quality oil. They maybe say it's extra virgin olive oil. It probably isn't, because that's expensive and it shouldn't be out on a table in a clear glass bottle. It'll decay. First thing we do, we have about 800 calories of pretty unnecessary, food choices. So I'm not as resistant as Dr. Esselstyn that extra virgin olive oil has no role in a healthy human diet. Probably not in a healthy human diet for a heart patient, a diabetic, or an obese person, but definitely it's not butter, and definitely it's not lard, and definitely it's not marbled meat dripping on your barbecue. Definitely.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think I agree with you. I think sometimes I hear the argument that we tried this low-fat diet for the last 30, 40 years and heart disease keep getting worse. But matter of fact, in reality, we have not tried the low-fat diet, because we went down from like 33, 34% to like 26, 27%. That's not low-fat diet.
Right.
And our calories have gone up, and our body can make a lot of the cholesterol from unhealthy carbs. So I think if you want really to eliminate the heart disease, the fat has to be about 15%, like those Okinawan people.
Right.
And we are way far from that. So I think when people say low-fat diet has failed, we have not tried true low-fat diet yet. So
it's failed to be adopted by the public. That's how it's failed, because of all these mixed messages, particularly in the last decade. And I shout out, there are, pretty academic physicians who've been involved in this funding conflicts. This paper that was just written, these are MDs at universities, but how do you fund your research? Well, the egg board, the meat board, and the dairy board are more than happy to fund your research, and they have much deeper pockets than the broccoli board.
That brings my next question, which is also another hard question. What is the role of aspirin in primary prevention? That means people who did not have heart attack or
Yeah.
stroke, should they be taking aspirin?
Yeah. There was pretty clear messaging starting the end of 2018 because, as you know, 3 studies were published in September 2018 that were very large. You're 50 years old, randomized, take a baby aspirin or not. There was no overwhelming evidence that it was a benefit, and a few people developed stomach upset and bleeding. They did the similar study in 70-year-olds, no convincing evidence. And then they actually did it in diabetic patients, where you might have thought maybe it would be a good policy. Most importantly, these 3 very large studies that could not confirm that everybody should take a daily baby aspirin did not include heart attack patients, stroke patients, bypass patients, or people with heart stents. And the message in the newspapers, unfortunately, confused a lot of people. And I had stent patients that stopped their aspirin because USA Today said, we've discovered. So I believe their message and the research was correct, but there's 2 groups that should ignore it. Those with heart attack, stroke, stents, bypass, they should talk to their doctors about it, or peripheral vascular blockage. And secondly, the high calcium score patient. There's pretty good unanimity. If you've bothered to spend that $100 and get your heart scan and it came back 582 calcium units, you probably should take an 81 milligram aspirin. You do have heart disease. But otherwise, I don't know your practice. I didn't put everybody on aspirin, 10 years ago. I put, bona fide heart patients on aspirin, but of course I was seeing heart patients. So we do have pretty good clarity. Now, eating whole food plant-based diets lower inflammation. They may actually improve the viscosity and the thinness of blood. Garlic, ginger, turmeric, having a good omega-3 source from flaxseed, chia seed, hemp parts, algae, so there's plenty of ways to keep your blood naturally healthy and thin.
So that brings up to what you do every day. You have established this Cardiac Longevity Center of Excellence. Please tell us about it, how people can take advantage of it, whether the insurance covers it or not, and do you have any online program?
Yeah, good question. So after 25 years of hospital and office consultative practice, cath lab, heart attacks, I established my clinic in suburban Detroit, the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. I chose not to take insurance, not to become a multi-zillionaire, because frankly, I see far fewer patients per day than I used to, and volume matters, as you know. But I want to spend an hour and a half with a new patient. I want to spend a half an hour. I do complex labs and complex testing and complex nutritional assessments, and I want to go over them with you and make an impact. So I don't take insurance. I see school teachers, and I see retirees, and I see police officers, and I see some executives from big businesses too. But we can make a program work for you pretty much for anybody. I am actually doing online programs in terms of filming right now. I've largely, like you, I've done Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and I've written 1,000 articles for free. Anybody, just go to a search engine, Joel Kahn Health Articles, there's everywhere, and podcasts, my podcasts, other people's podcasts. So I believe you give away your knowledge as widely and as freely as possible. And some of it will come back because you'll attract a new patient or help somebody without ever meeting them. But I actually have done a couple online courses now that I think about it on longevity, because if you're teaching whole food plant-based diets and sleep and fitness, you are teaching longevity, even if you don't call it that. But I'm very interested in actually the science of aging and the science of potentially prolonging our healthy life. Cutting edge science, gene therapy, stem cell therapy, certain new nutrients that are out there. Interestingly, most of them are coming from plants, but you have to be cautious. So I'm very cautious telling my patients, here's the next great fountain of youth, because the fountain of youth is mainly lifestyle right now.
And I think that's an excellent point. I know I've heard you raving about Walter Longo and fasting mimicking diet and longevity. And I think so we will bring you back probably in a few months to talk more. But
sure.
Another question is, you have written many, many books, actually. I have all of them. I've read all of them. Out of all your book, if our listener wants to buy one book, to be healthy, which book would you recommend?
Probably, I showed you my most recent book about that special cholesterol, but the one before it is called Plant-Based Solution. It's a paperback on all the booksellers like Amazon. It's inexpensive. It's half science and it's half recipes that are very easy to introduce in your life. I'm just noticing if I have a copy, but I don't. It's got a beautiful cover of fruits and berries and such, the Plant-Based Solution, because it really goes very simply, because I don't like to write books that are, you know, an encyclopedia, because a few people will read them, but it just goes through what's the data for whole food plant-based for heart, for diabetes, for weight, for brain, for sexual health, for cancer, for depression and psychiatric disorders, and it really goes through. They're all referenced. You and I mean, people sometimes say, you're so biased because you're a plant-based doctor. Well, it's actually the opposite. I happened to enter this field, in the way I discussed when we started, but I maintain myself as a plant-based human because of the data, and I want to teach my patients because of the data. So the data is in the book. The data is impressive. In fact, I would say the data is overwhelming that we could change the health of the world in poor countries and wealthier countries by reestablishing traditional diets based on simple plants, root vegetables, grains, rice, beans, obviously gardens and vegetables, and not depend on big companies and fast food companies, of course, to feed us. It's been a grave error and a very bad mistake.
So I think I'll tell you one thing. I made a list of 10 giants in healthy lifestyle, and you are like in top 5. So I have that page on Facebook. I will keep repeating on my
You're
YouTube.
very
videos.
kind.
No, that's true, and it's a very sincere, honest opinion. So that brings a kind of a mega question for you to think it and then answer it. We have seen so much from you in last so many years, so much. What are you going to bring to us in the next 10, 20 years, which we should be waiting eagerly for?
It's a wonderful and provocative question, and probably 2 areas. One will be, I need to write an updated book as a cardiologist who's been doing cath lab and office and hospital and now preventive on reversal of heart disease. Reversal of heart disease is real, and Dr. Ornish, Mr. Pritikin, Dr. Esselstyn, but there really hasn't been much new on it. And my approach to it is built on the shoulders of those giants, but also some additional integrative and science approaches. So look out for that, really trying to get the word out. If you haven't yet had a stent or bypass, but it's being recommended, get a second opinion and learn about the data all the way up to this new ischemia study in April 2020, which wasn't a plant-based study, but it sets the absolute foundation. And most people don't need surgery and stents. Most people need lifestyle and proper medication. And that's, one basis. So, and if you've had bypass, heart attack, stents, if you're not embracing a lifestyle of joy, of energy, of vitality, but focused on stabilizing or reversing your heart disease, you need to find somebody to teach you that. That's one. And the other will be focus on aging, longevity that you've mentioned, Dr. Longo. I think the next 10 years will be very, very exciting. But right now, don't smoke, exercise, sleep, eat your plants, and maybe incorporate some fasting is the real foundation that we know right now is going to promote longevity.
That's great. No, I think thanks for coming, Dr. Kahn. I really, really appreciate you. I think we are bringing you every 3-4 months, getting an update from you. Every listener, every follower, is learned a lot from you. This will be on YouTube. This video will be watched by YouTube. And I wish you the best. And we are friends, so we'll keep seeing each other at different live meetings, and hopefully one day come and see your center also.
Oh, you're so kind, and let's break some naan pretty soon when we can reopen the economy, hopefully very soon, for everybody's mental health and economic health. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.